This is Stereoactive Presents. I'm your host, Jeremiah McVay, and in this episode, I am joined once again by Charles Hinshaw, this time to discuss Bradley Cooper's second film as a director and co-writer. Maestro stars Cooper as conductor and composer Leonard Bernstein, Carey Mulligan as his wife Felicia, and is available on Netflix. In just a moment, you'll hear my review of the film, followed by my discussion with Chuck. Before 2012's Silver Linings Playbook, Bradley Cooper may have seemed like he was destined to be in nothing but pulpy movies like Limitless or bro flicks like The Hangover. At the time, both fairly recent hits for him that had already changed his career and made him a more bankable leading man. But Silver Linings Playbook put him into that different category of quote-unquote serious actor, seemingly destined to one day win an Academy Award. And 2018's A Star is Born proved him also a serious prospect as a writer and director. So anticipation for a second film as a triple hyphenate, actor, writer, director, Maestro, was obviously highly anticipated. Unfortunately, there's also been a certain narrative building up around Cooper, at least with the very online portion of the film commentariat, that his supposed thirst to prove himself by winning an Oscar and being taken seriously as not only an actor, but an all-around filmmaker is cringy and unseemly. But if you can deliver the goods, maybe you deserve a bit of allowance in that regard. And ultimately, Cooper has the goods. Between Maestro and A Star is Born, he's clearly proven himself to be a great director. As far as acting goes, I don't think the jury was still out on that one. Really, the only real problem with Maestro, which portrays the relationship between famed conductor and composer Leonard Bernstein and his wife Felicia, is its screenplay, which counterintuitively is not to say the writing is bad necessarily. Each scene is internally impressive on its own, but the film as a whole lacks a solid through line and feels disjointed and, as a result, unfocused. Perhaps this can at least be partly attributed to the decision to position the film as if it's actually more about Felicia, wonderfully played, by the way, by Carey Mulligan, than it is about Bernstein himself. It's a perplexing decision because it leaves Bernstein feeling inadequately explored, while the centering of Felicia seems forced and itself inadequately justified. All that said, it's not every day we get a movie as otherwise beautifully shot, crafted, and performed as Maestro. So here's hoping the next screenplay Cooper co-writes is up to his skills as a director and performer, as well as the skills of the excellent crew and cast he surrounds himself with. From this point on, we may discuss elements of the plot that some would consider spoilers, so if you don't want to know anything about the movie at this time, you may want to come back and listen to this later. So, Chuck, we kind of got into it very briefly in our episode about the Oscar nominations. But as you could hear here, I think the screenplay is a problem. Everything else I think is really good about this movie. What are your thoughts?
Screenplay, major problem. Danger, Will Robinson. No, I guess you're right that, it's technically proficient. I'm not so sure about Carey Mulligan because I'm not certain what the real Felicia was supposed to be like. And I know there was some controversy because the real Felicia is from Costa Rica and Carey Mulligan is decidedly not. But to what degree that really affects things, I don't know. Like, perhaps, for all I know, she really did sound the way that Carey Mulligan. The accent is very specific, and yet at the same time, sort of out of nowhere in a way. Like, sort of like, what is that? And I don't know if it's just this kind of mid-Atlantic, like Katharine Hepburn-esque thing that people maybe had at a certain time period. But I think elements of her performance, I'm sort of not sure if it was right or not, those choices. As far as like Does she make the choices and go for it? Yeah, absolutely. And I don't really, I don't have a problem with that. And I don't think that it's a bad performance. It's kind of perplexing.
Mm.
And something that they don't, there's a lot of things, again, I guess screenplay, like that they just don't get into.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that she is from Costa Rica, it's like mentioned in the background of an interview scene, and that's it. Who is she? What is, especially if they're gonna go and claim that this movie is really about her
Mm-hmm.
and not Lenny. It's like, well, what's her backstory? What's her origin story?
Yeah.
We don't really know those things. And then as far as Bernstein's concerned, there's so much about like West Side Story and um on the waterfront, and then being a conductor, and like the difference between conducting and composing, and you just like don't get it. It all kind of gets thrown together into this weird dream sequence at the beginning ish in the first act. And it's so like unclear. It's just very unclear, very murky as to like what we're watching and what the trajectory is. And then I'll say that the thing that I found totally perplexing, like totally like what the fuck, was where they separate. And okay, I understand why they separate. And then she seems to be kind of doing her thing in her life, going on a date with a guy or whatever. He's like doing cocaine all of a sudden and partying and all this. And then they cut to him doing Mahler's second, and they're back together again. Like that, like somehow the conducting of that piece of music like brought them back together again. But it comes out of nowhere.
Yeah.
I mean, really, like there's no setup for it whatsoever.
Yeah.
So stuff like that just really grated on me as far as like, what is this movie? And how did they see a movie I didn't see,
Yeah. I think a lot of what you're saying gets at what I was trying to get at in my review of saying that I think each scene is internally impressively written. Like,
right.
But it seems like a bunch of scenes that someone would do in an acting class.
Sure.
Like I don't mean that in a bad way. It would be like, I understand why someone picked this. It's like a well-written scene and you can do a lot with it as a performer. But yeah, I think that it's just a bunch of scenes and the connective tissue is not there. So you don't, so you feel like you're always trying to like catch up to the movie in a bad way. Of trying to figure out how you got from that scene to this one.
Yeah.
But it is like there are certain scenes that like they are so good within themselves that like I can just watch it and enjoy it. But then like when we move on, I'm frustrated. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a frustrating movie that way because it's
I think it's
I do very well made.
Right. And I wonder if there's not like a little showiness going on there.
Sure.
Like I think about the scene where they fight on Thanksgiving and it's all one shot, and it's just, you talk about the acting class sort of concept of it. It's just so clear to me that it's this like actors showcase,
right?
For this scene about a married. I mean, it's like, and I don't know, for those of us who've been in acting classes, like, and one act plays and all that kind of thing, like the married fighting couple is almost a cliche.
Sure.
As far as those sort of scenarios go.
Yeah, and that was ultimately the least interesting part of the movie. I liked watching them get together and try to figure things out, So yeah.
Yeah, and I thought it was odd. I mean, I can understand, but I thought it was odd that she seemed very accepting of who he was, and even makes the statement like, I know exactly who you are and all this kind of shit. And then I don't know. It's like, like grades on her in some capacity. And that would be okay if we got some kind of build up to that. And it didn't seem to just kind of turn on a dime.
Yeah. Speaking of build up, I feel like they put so much pressure in a way on just this last cut of the movie. From the final shot is of Carey Mulligan as Felicia, and then it cuts to the title Maestro.
Right.
As if they didn't have to do all the work, and then they could just be like, see, she's the Maestro.
Right.
And
right.
like, well, you didn't quite show that though. Like,
Yeah.
You showed that she was an important person in his life, but you didn't show the depths of that, So
right. I think that if their goal was to somehow get beyond there's a woman, woman behind every great man trope, I don't think they came anywhere near successfully getting past that. That seemed exactly like what was kind of going on here. Was like he was the brilliant rapscallion that she sort of put up with for whatever, because she just loved him so much.
Yeah.
He was just such a genius. And how that affected, and it would be interesting to know more about how that maybe played a role in his music and his career, but they really don't go into any of that.
Yeah. It's a movie that's really about neither of them in a way, but pretends to be about one of them, which is kind of maddening to watch. But yeah, like I can't stress it enough. I feel like I'm beating a dead horse, but like I really think it's such a well-made movie. Other than the fucking screenplay, like I think it looks phenomenal. I think the editing is great. I think the performances are really great. Like I think he's so good. I didn't really like. I understand what you're saying about like her voice and like all that. I think so much of that, as you also kind of pointed out, stems from like the screenplay not doing the work and leaving it to her. And I think she does a great job with what she's given and like elevates it past what it would be if it was just what was on the page, I think. So I think every aspect of this movie is impressively executed somehow without a screenplay that really does it justice.
I agree that it's technically proficient for sure. I don't know about, the performances. They're good actors. I mean, I like Carey Mulligan. I like Bradley Cooper. I don't know what he's doing with his voice. Again, it's like the voice stuff. The voice work is weird to me. It's a little like I don't know what you guys are doing or why. But that might also be, as I said, a sort of detriment of me not knowing what Leonard Bernstein actually sounds like. So there you go. But
and to me, at some point, like those things about like his voice and her voice, I don't give a shit about like what the reality of those people was to some degree. I want it to make sense in the movie. I want it to work in the movie. I don't want it to bother me in the movie. And like those didn't bother me at a certain point. Like it took me a while to acclimate maybe to both of them, more so to Mulligan and the voice that she's using, but in the end it didn't bother me. But I think that's such a personal preference or whatever thing. Like I understand what you're saying.
It's also something. It has something to do with him being the director and the writer and the producer and all that as well. Where I'm wary of the unrestrained actor, the one who has no one to tell him no. And my favorite movie is a vanity piece. Reds is a total vanity piece. So I'm not above that, or like, but you really gotta like hit it on all cylinders, including the script, for
Yeah.
it to, sort of, or else you're really losing me.
Yeah.
Um,
And I mean, he
and
kind of
I,
did
yeah,
with A Star Is Born. That's a movie that I think
right.
is
I liked
he
that.
he's firing on all cylinders there. I mean, I do think
Absolutely.
this movie looks better than that movie.
Mhm.
The performances I think are great in both. The
Mhm.
screenplay for A Star Is Born is better. I mean, he's
Yeah.
starting from a well known
Right. Right.
story and like improving on something that needed improving on in some ways, from what I
Mhm.
understand. I've never saw the Barbara Streisand, Chris Christopherson. I've never saw
Mhm.
any of the previous versions, but I'm mentioning that
Right.
one just because it's most directly based off of that one, because that's the one that switched it to music from Hollywood and
Right. Right. Right.
anyway, going down a digression there.
No, but I think it's a good point, because I mean, he's doing a voice in that too, and that didn't bother me. That made sense to me. And I do think you kind of have to compare the two, because it is, as you sort of mentioned in your review, he was such an actor guy, and for a while not a serious one. And then it kind of, you're like, oh, he can really act, and now it's like, oh, now he's going to direct and write and produce, and be the master, the sort of the puppeteer, if you will. And I just think when people do that, when actors do that, you really, I don't know, you gotta kind of bring it all.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I get annoyed with a lot of actors who do that.
Yeah.
Clune Dog. Uh, like there's a lot of actors who, they produce and write and direct and star, and there is something to be said for that collaboration that no longer exists when you're kind of running every sort of element of it.
Right.
But uh, I don't know that would have saved this. I think I think we've kind of hit it on the head, that it was all about screenplay.
Yeah.
But they thought they had something on their hand, and they're nominated for an Oscar, so they're not. No one. There's no justice.
Right.
They're not gonna.
I really, yeah, that's the one that irks me. Everything else I'm fine with, because like I said, I
Yeah.
think it looks great. I think the performances are good. But yeah, that
Right.
screenplay nomination is like, what?
Yeah.
What were they
weird.
thinking? I mean, I wonder. I don't remember who the other writers of it were.
It's just one other guy
Is it just one?
who I don't know.
Oh, it's A Star Is
Yeah.
Born that he has two co-writers on, and one of them's Eric.
Okay.
But I do know this though, that like this movie has been gestating in Hollywood for a long time.
Right.
For a long time, Spielberg was going to make it, and I think kept pushing it off. And finally, I think after he saw Stars Born, or at some point, I don't know if it was before that or after that. At some point, he said, "You should make this, Bradley, and I'll produce." Or
Right.
I don't know how much he was hands on as a producer, or if he was just like, he developed the project and then handed it off.
Yeah.
But I wonder how much sometimes that kind of thing plays into these, of like, people knew the screenplay for years,
Mhm.
or a version of this screenplay for years,
Right.
and wanted to honor it finally getting made. I don't know.
Yeah.
I have no idea.
Well, I mean, it's interesting to wonder how Spielberg was involved, and also how Scorsese was involved, because
Right.
they're both producers.
Yeah.
And yeah, perhaps it was passed from their, one person to the next. And, but there's great movies that happens with
Totally.
too.
Totally.
So I guess there's a part of me that thinks that Bradley Cooper, as talented as he is, maybe swung a little too, like, flew a little too close to the sun on this.
Yeah. Here's
Um,
the only wrinkle I'll throw in there. I almost wish he swung even bigger. Like
yeah.
it's rare
Maybe
that
that
I will
was.
say that I wish a movie was a TV show instead.
Sure.
But I do wonder if this would have made more sense as like the biggest prestige Netflix series ever made, like with the same
Right.
quality of production as this movie, through multiple episodes that could really get into each of those sections that this movie gets into, but never gets into enough,
Right.
Like
Right.
I would have found that compelling. And like I don't
Yeah.
know that I've ever seen that before. Like there've been obviously prestige TV and peak TV that's
Mhm.
been our lives for decades now at this point.
Right.
But I don't know that I've ever truly seen a TV show, multiple episode TV show, limited series that has been fully produced from head to tail at the same quality as a movie could be. Like there's always like corners cut because the
Right.
budget's too big
Right.
because it's so many things to make. I don't know. I'm just like throwing it out
Yeah,
there.
I think as far as this kind of thing, and yeah, maybe it would have worked better. I just don't. It's not that long to begin with. I mean, I think you could have, as much as like I'm on mic complaining about movies being too long these days. I
This could have
don't.
used more time.
I wouldn't have, if it had in sort of infused the movie with more of what we're sort of talking about missing. I don't
Yeah.
think an extra 20 minutes would have been a problem.
Right. Right.
Or half hour, whatever. Like if Oppenheimer can be 3 hours, so can this. You
Right.
know, it's not, I don't think that would be an issue.
Yeah. I'm with you.
So yeah, so maybe that was, and I remember, and for some reason, uh my mom thought she saw that there was a director's cut on Netflix, and I was like, "Oh, that's weird that there's a director's cut." There's not. It was a miss. It was a miss, but it was funny to watch the movie thinking there was one.
Yeah.
To be like, "Oh, I wonder what he cut out and why he cut it out, why it's not in here, and all this kind of stuff." Because it kind of feels a little bit like someone cut it up because it was too long or something,
Yeah.
you know, and they sort of did some, I don't know, like Blade Runner did or something, you know.
Yeah. I
But
don't know.
I don't think that's the case.
No. I think like that the movie as it exists, like I go back to the each scene working internally within itself.
Right.
I think each
Right.
scene is edited great.
Mhm.
But yeah, I really do think it comes back to screenplay more than that.
I think so too.
Yeah.
I think so too.
Yeah.
I think if it had been a better screenplay and a more concentrated screenplay, and maybe it tried to do too much. I don't know. Like in the sense of it's got to be about music and it's got to be about marriage and it's got to be about pseudo closeted homosexuality and
Mhm.
it's got to be like, maybe if they had just picked one sort of avenue to go down. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know that would have worked because like those all seem important to who he is or who they were. So,
Right.
but I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. Any final thoughts?
I kind of thought I did not like this movie.
Mhm.
That's my final thought.
Okay.
And I was bummed. Because I thought the trailer was great.
Yeah.
I loved the trailer so much. That second full length trailer they put out, I thought was so cool.
Yeah.
And was so great to see like an epic character movie and not just like an epic, you know, Napoleon or whatever.
Yeah.
So I was bummed that it wasn't as, you know, it wasn't what I thought it was going to be.
Yeah. The trailer didn't do it for me as much as other people. Like,
Mhm.
I saw so many people online like just losing it for that trailer, and I thought it was good. It made me interested in the movie for sure. What
Mhm.
what really got me was as the movie started, in the first like I don't know several minutes of
Mhm.
it, 10, 20, I don't know how long. I was like, is this gonna be like one of the best movies I've seen in a while? And
Yeah.
then as it goes on, we start hitting those pitfalls that we've been discussing of like, I feel like something's missing here. Okay, now I'm dejected or deflated. I feel deflated about this movie now. It's not that.
Right.
So it was just disappointing in that way. But
Yeah.
anyway, it's on Netflix, so anybody could watch and make their
Right.
own
Yeah.
mind about
See
it.
it for yourself and be disappointed for yourself. No, if you like, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
Teach
All right.
their own.
Well, thank you, Chuck.
Thank you.
Thank Thank you for listening to Stereoactive Presents, and thank you to our guest, Charles Hinshaw. The music in this podcast is composed by Hansdale Sue. My name is Jeremiah Lee McVay. If you like what you hear in the show, please rate and review it in Good Pods, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else that allows that. Doing so helps us to expand our audience, and it's much appreciated. And please follow us wherever you happen to listen to podcasts. Every little bit helps, and like I said, it is truly appreciated. You can also get in touch with us at stereoactivemedia@gmail.com, and you can find more information about this show and everything else that Stereoactive Media is involved with at stereoactivemedia.com.
This podcast is produced by Stereoactive Media.